2024. What a good day to be here in the Lord's house. I want to talk about an interesting topic today. As you walked in this morning, though, I hope many of you saw that we have replaced that beautiful brown carpet that had many years of memories embedded into the stains of it. And it is no longer with us. It has departed. And so we have affectionately said goodbye to that. And we're extremely grateful. I just want to say this to Carpets by David and Wilson, who did such a wonderful job and so generous in looking after this church. And honestly and surely, I want you to see that today. If you haven't walked out these doors, look at the difference. It has made a tremendous difference in the appearance of our church. And I've always believed that if we're going to take care of our homes, we need to take care of His home. And I know the body is His home. I do know that, but this is the place where His home gathers together. And we need to make sure that we take care of it. And what an awesome job they did to make it look good. It's good to see you here today, especially after Yahoo proclaimed this past week that Saturday would be the rapture. I don't know if many of you saw that. And so the fact that you're here today is one of two things. Either they were wrong, or we all have something very poorly in common. I choose to believe that they were wrong. They changed their thoughts. A mathematician said that the rapture would take place Saturday. I actually read that in the headlines. Many of you may have seen it too, whether it be on the news or some social media site. It was actually a prediction that was made. And then at the night hour, they changed it and said their math was a little off and that was not going to be Saturday. So, sorry, but we're going to talk about that today because that is a topic that's not new. In Matthew chapter 24, we see Jesus, He opens up in verse 1, it says, well, He just completed His last message. He just closed a chapter of His earthly life. And now as He leaves the temple, He addresses a question that many of the disciples had that we today have ourselves. Now, I'm going to give you a little background before I read this. In verse 1, we're going to see that, like I said, Jesus has finished His message and He's left the temple for the last time. He's left this place that has a great focus throughout the Old Testament and the New Testament. David wanted to build it, but God didn't give him the authority to do it. Solomon built the temple, and the temple was absolutely amazing. Here we see that over years that the temple had fallen apart, and King Herod, the king of the Jews, who by the way was not a Jew, so was not the rightful king, he knew his political power was hanging in the balance time and time again. So he helped fund, organize the reconstruction of the temple. And he used a workforce of about 10,000 men to rebuild the temple. And it took many years. It went well beyond his life expanse. As a matter of fact, very interesting is that the temple was completely restored, and then 6 years later, it was destroyed again. In AD 70, under Titius or Titus, depending on who you are, he came in, the Roman leader, the Roman power, and he destroyed the temple. And Jesus predicted that not one stone would be laid upon another. We can still go there today and still see the ruins of the temple, interestingly enough. As a matter of fact, if you've ever heard of the Wailing Wall, have you ever heard of the Wailing Wall? That is a portion that is still standing and probably is one of the most iconic land areas in Jerusalem and Israel, a place where hundreds of thousands and even millions of people go and pay homage to. But they left the temple. And in verse 1, I'm going to start reading this. It says, as Jesus was leaving the temple grounds, now, for the last time, I want you to let that sink in for a moment. You ever been somewhere and it just really meant something to you? Maybe a favorite place or some nostalgic getaway in the mountains or a little abode at the beach. And you leave it and you go, you know what, I may never come back here. And it kind of pulls at your heartstrings and so forth. And Jesus, the temple was a special place to Him. We saw months ago where Jesus cleansed the temple because of their sacrilegious practices. They were robbing people basically at the temple. And he knew that the temple was set to honor God. So it has a special place humanistically speaking in His heart. And it says, as He was leaving the temples, the temple grounds, his disciples pointed out to him the various buildings. Now, I don't know about you, but if you've ever studied the temple, it is absolutely amazing. During Solomon's time, the Bible says that silver was like dust and gold was like rocks. And the temple was overlaid in gold and precious wood and cedar. And I just could not imagine being alive during Solomon's reign and seeing all the splendor. And the temple was just a beautiful place. And the disciples were going, man, check that building out. That is awesome. Look how beautiful it is. It is so close to what it looked like, no doubt, under Solomon many years ago. And Jesus had just come face to face with false teachers. And no doubt they were probably trying to lighten the mood. Look at that, look at that, look at that. You know how kids are sometimes, of all ages. Look at the buildings. But he responded, do you see these buildings? I tell you the truth, and by the way, Jesus always tells the truth. They will be completely demolished. Not one stone will be left on top of another. Later, Jesus sat on the Mount of Olives, a place he often visited with his disciples, and his disciples came to him privately and said, tell us, when is this going to happen? What sign will signal your return in the end of the world? Jesus told them, don't let anyone mislead you. For many will come in my name claiming I am the Messiah, and they will deceive many. Now we're going to talk about the two meanings of this verse. And it actually does have two meanings today. Verse 6. And you will hear wars and rumors of wars and threats, but don't panic. These things must come to pass, he says, but the end will not immediately follow. Nation will go to war against nation and kingdom against kingdom. The word nation in the Greek we're going to talk about, that means race. Race will go to war against race and kingdom against kingdom. And there will be famines and earthquakes in many parts of the world. But all of this is only the first of birth pains. And there's going to be more to follow these. Then you will be arrested, persecuted, and killed. You will be hated all over the world because you are my followers. Verse 10. And many will turn away from me, and they will betray, and they will hate one another. Many false prophets will appear, and they will deceive many people. Networking many people. Sin will be rampant everywhere. The love of many people will grow cold. There's going to be no more love, but the one who endures to the end will be saved. And then the last verse, the good news about the kingdom will be preached throughout the whole world so that all nations will hear it. And then Jesus says the end will come. We're going to ask the question, and through the words of Jesus, answer it today and possibly next week. When will the end take place? Pray with me. Father, I ask that you begin this message as you are in your word, that I would not do anything to hinder it, to mislead, or misrepresent it. In Christ's name, amen. We're going to cover part of this today and part of it next week. But first of all, I want to see the deception of the Christ. He asked this question. He says, when is this going to take place? When are these terrible things? When is the world going to end? When are you going to come back? That's what they were asking Jesus. And Jesus begins to talk about what we have coined today as the church age. How many of you have ever heard the phrase church age? Anybody? The church age. The church age is the time frame between Jesus, his death on the cross, the incarnation of the church, the beginning of the church, and his second coming. The age that you and I are living in now is the church age. So they say, okay, Jesus, when will the end come? When will this world change as we know it? When will all these terrible things happen? In verses 4 through 5, he says, let me read it to you one more time because I don't want to mislead. He says, don't let anyone mislead you, for many will come in my name saying, I am the Messiah, and they will deceive me. Now we've heard this explained one way. We've heard it said that people will come and say, I am the Christ. But if you really study this passage and you look at it, it has two meanings. It means this. Number one, people are going to come and claim to be Jesus. Number two, people are going to come and say, here comes Jesus. That's what it means. It's twofold meaning. It means that some will say that I am the Christ, I am the Messiah, follow me, believe me. And some will say, there he is, he's coming now, he's coming Saturday. And you know, we've had this recently. I want to just give you some information based on 2017 alone. National Geographic, back in August, I think, of 2017, did an article, and the article was entitled, "Meek Men Who Think They Are the Messiah." There's Henry, which was the name that was taken from the initials above the head of Christ. I saw the image of him, the little biography of him, and people in their village, they carry him around on their shoulders in a little thing that looked like it was made for the Princess of Sheba or the Queen of Sheba. It's amazing how they treat him. They worship him because he says he is the Christ. There is Moses Hokwani. I've never seen that name in the Greek, but he is from South Africa, and he claims to be the coming Messiah on the earth. There's the Syrian, who is the Christ of the Siberia, the Jesus of Kitwa, Zambia. He's a cab driver by day, by the way. Listen, guys, I can't make this up. The Jesus of Zambia drives a cab through the day. You know times are tough when that happens. There's Jesus Matagoshi. He's not from Rocky Mount, he is from Japan. More recent notes, there was the Jim Jones. Remember that? Many of you remember Jim Jones and the Gannett incident. There was David Koresh down in Waco, Texas, who believed he was the Messiah. He used that thought process to manipulate people, to basically violate the innocence of young ladies and married ladies. He used that abuse of power, and people clung to him, and they believed that he was the Messiah. More recently, down in the Central Florida area, there was Jose Luis de Jesus Miranda, who was himself, I've seen this, pastoring a 20-something church and had thousands of members, and he claimed that he was Jesus Christ. They were not ignorant individuals, they were very intelligent techies, and they believed that he was, as he said, Jesus. Now, I find it interesting that all three of these men are dead now. But he says there are going to be people that come and say, I am Christ. And you go, no, that's not going to happen. Nobody's going to believe that. But it's happening all over the world, and people believe it, even here in our own country. But the second meaning is there are going to be people that say, here comes Jesus. He's coming at a specific day, and you need to be ready. The Bible tells us that no man knows the day nor the hour, later on in verse 36 of this particular chapter. William Miller in the 1800s wrote a book that said Jesus would return in April 1843. If you read anything about that, you'll read that many people sold their possessions and gathered on a specific mountain so they could get a head start to heaven. I kid you not. Can you imagine May 1843? All the people looking for homes and jobs. Some waited in the graveyards to be with their families because they thought that they would be able to see them on that resurrection day. In 1988, a NASA engineer, Edgar Wisnet, sold 4.3 million copies of a book, 88 Reasons That Christ Will Return in 88. People did the same thing. 4.3 million copies of a book explaining why Jesus would come back in 1988, and it did not happen. In the year 2000, many prepared for Y2K, the potential shutdown, but there were some saying that Jesus would come back at the tick of a clock in the year 2000. Even preachers preached that. And most recently, this past week, 2017, a mathematician said that he calculated that Jesus was coming back this past Saturday. And then, as I said earlier, at the 9th hour, he said, you know what, I was wrong. I hit the wrong button. Jesus is not coming back tomorrow. Jesus is talking to the people, and he says that I want you to understand that when this is on a rampant rise, when people begin to talk about there's the Messiah, he's coming today, or I am the Messiah, he said, I want you to be mindful because that is the beginning of a process that we have called the raptures. As a matter of fact, he uses verse 8 and he refers to this as birth pains. Mothers are awesome ladies. They put their lives on the line to bring us into this world. How many of you mothers remember birth pains? Raise your hand. You smile now. But chances are you probably didn't smile much then. I remember when Reagan and Bryson were born, I fell in love with something they called an epidural. Not because it did anything for me, but because it took what I thought was a very sweet woman and turned her into something from the Gremlins. I mean, the way she looked at me, I remember going into the waiting room and I wanted to give her some ice. They told me to do that. I just do what I was told. And she said, "Get that ice away from me." But she said it in a voice with her head going around like this. I don't know. And I said, "Okay." And then they gave her that wonderful thing. And man, it was like my wife was back again. But birth pains, listen, one of the things they tell you to look for is when you have these contractions, and there are false contractions called Braxton Hicks contractions that make you think you're getting ready to go into labor, but you're not. But they tell you you don't really know to be sure, so make sure you go to the doctor. And Jesus is saying, listen, when you see these contractions, you know that the child is on the way. We don't know when. The labor may be quick, it may be long, we don't know when, but we know when these birthing pains, when these contractions come, that there is a baby that will be in this world soon. He is using the analogy here, and he says, when you see these things I'm about to tell you about, understand something. I am not yet here, but look, because it will not be long. Now we said, does that mean he's coming back this year? Can I tell you something? The definition of long in the eyes and the scope of eternity is unrecognizable. I don't know when Jesus is coming back. If anyone tells you they know when he's coming back, you mark that person as someone that deserves no credibility. How do I say that with confidence? Because the Bible says that no man or woman knows the day. Here's what he's saying here. When you see these birth pains, and he gives us several birth pains. Real quick, I'm going to give you a few of them. Found in verses 6 through 7 and 9 through 11, he says, when you hear wars and rumors of wars. August 2017, a publication entitled Wars of the World stated the 22 conflicts around the globe that threat to erupt into a major military standoff globally. That was 2007. We have seen recently our nation and North Korea have many exchanges, and not all of them are pleasant. And we see that North Korea has oftentimes been engaging other nations in threats of testing and the usage of military force, and that action could set off a chain of events that will be in the history books forever. And he says, when you see these wars and rumors of wars, and I got a lot of statistics, but I'm not going to bore you with that today. He said, that's a birth pain. That's a contraction. I want you to mark that. He says, nation will go against the nation and kingdom against kingdom. The word nation is ethnos in the Greek. Ethnos. What does ethnos sound like? Ethnos, ethnicity, ethnic. He says, when you see races against races and conflict within the nation itself, kingdom against kingdom. We live in a world, not just in our nation, but throughout the globe, in which there are racial tensions. There are tensions within America and in itself. It could be within the same race of different races, but people are arguing and fighting and judging and hating each other for no other reason, just because they feel like it. He says, when you see this, nation against nation, kingdom against kingdom, when he talks about famines in verse number 7, the Greek word for famine means destitute or hungry. New York Times, February the 22nd. This year, why 20 million people were on the brink of famine in a world of plenty. The Washington Post this year said 20 million people in the world are at risk of starving to death. In the United States alone, of America alone, 1 in 6 people face borderline starvation or hunger, according to recent statistics. And I try to give you things from 2017, not from years past. He says, so there's going to be a rise in hunger, a rise in famine, but part of the world will be prosperous and then part of the world will suffer. There will be earthquakes all around the world, in many parts of the world, not just where they are expected. Many of you remember a few years ago, you might have been at home or in the office when you felt a little jolt under your feet and there was an earthquake here in Rocky Mountain. Some people maybe not even realize it. I remember being in the office and seeing my windows do like this, and I thought, now that's unusual. Didn't have a clue there was an earthquake. The Greek word for the earthquake is seismos, which we get seismograph from. A tool used to measure the details. A deeper study of the word, it means a common movement of ground or the air. I love this when I found this. Check this out. The word earthquake, seismos, it means a strong movement in ground or in air. And he says, if we take it for what it says when you see an increase in ground movement or volatility in the air, such as hurricanes, tornadoes, typhoons, cyclones. He said those are birthing pains. So we just watched recently on the news as just about every letter in the alphabet lined up to hit the lower seaboard of the United States of America. These are birth pains. Earthquakes, and then he uses one, and this is where I'm going to stop for a moment, and I'll pick up next week. He says, and many will be persecuted. We're not persecuted here. Persecution is not when someone laughs at you because you pray. Persecution is not because someone teases you because you go to church. Fox News in 2017, for the second year in a row, did a survey throughout the globe and listed the top 3 or 4 persecuted groups. The number 1 persecuted group in the world for 2 years in a row. Guess what it is? Christians. More Christians throughout the world. Listen to what I'm saying, because we have been so comforted and pampered here in the United States. More Christians around the world are dying because they say, I believe in Jesus, than any other people group today. We've seen the sensationalization of ISIS, where they beheaded, burned alive, put in a cage and drowned, ran over with heavy equipment, exploded devices attached to individuals' bodies. And we shake our head and go, that's horrible. But do you understand why it happened? It happened because they either proclaimed their belief in a Christ, like the Coptic Christians in Egypt, or because of the color of their skin. You say, well, it's not going to happen here. We're living in a day and age in which we've already seen prayer removed from school. We're living in a day and age in which we've seen the 10 Commandments, in which our nation was built on, removed from government buildings. We're living in a day and age in which monuments that have been in place for many years have been asked to be removed. We're living in a day and age in which a pastor, I think it was down in Texas, his sermons were subpoenaed so they could go through them and make sure that there was nothing politically incorrect in his messages. We're living in a day and age in which someone's recently arrested because someone overheard them reading their Bible outside on the sidewalk near a DMV, so they were arrested and put in jail, but the charges were finally dropped. If you don't believe persecution is coming our way, then we're awful. Persecution didn't happen overnight. It's slow, it's gradual, but it eventually rears its ugly face. Jesus is saying, and then I'll finish, he said there's going to come a time when you see and feel the birth. Baby's not here, but you better be prepared because the baby is on its way. The night Reagan was born, I was freaked out. I got in the car, man, and I drove to Wilson Memorial Hospital, and right at Bill's Barbecue, a cop came up beside me. Just like on TV. Rolled the window down, because I actually stopped at a stoplight, believe it or not. And I said, my wife's having a baby. He said, okay. And he said, follow me. He went that way, and I turned right. I was nervous. When something like that happens, nerves take over. Bryson split his head open one time, and I carried him to the female doctor. I did. I don't know why. Angie said, where are you at? I said, I'm at the doctor's office. She said, that's my doctor's office. I said, okay, I'm coming. He's bleeding all over the car, but it was the heart that counts. I wanted to get him to a doctor. I just carried him to the wrong one. But here's the thing. The night that Reagan came into this world, I was told explicitly, watch for these signs. And when you see these signs, you better make sure that you're prepared. Because the child may not be here yet, but it will not be long. Let's take Jesus' words for a moment. He says, I'm giving you some signs. And when you see these signs as I have described them, understand something. The child, the appearing of Christ is not imminent. It's not going to happen that day. But I want you to prepare yourself because it is going to happen soon thereafter. He cannot be more fair than that. He pursues a loving relationship with you. He tells you how much He cares, and then He shows you by giving Himself freely in a horrendous sacrificial way. He fulfills His promise by dying, but what sets Him apart from anyone else? He fulfills His promise like no other by rising again. He says, I will go to prepare a place for you, and I will come back and receive you. And that's the only promise we're waiting to be fulfilled. So you see the birth pains, and we'll get a little more detail next week because we just scratched the surface today. But you see the birth pains, so what are you going to do with it? Now here's my question to you, and I will be pretty quick. I want you to think about this. What if that night I didn't heed the warning? What if that night I ignored the sign? I've never delivered a child. I don't know what would have happened. But see, my reaction to the warning, my response to the warning, the forewarning, my choice to that forewarning, that made all the difference. My choice. Angie didn't make the choice. I had to make the choice. I was going to take care of her that night. Your choices that you make concerning the warnings of God, you can't put the blame on God one day and say, God, you did not tell me. He does. He tells us through His Spirit, through circumstances, through His Word, that He loves you and that He wants you. And the choices that we make are not enforced by God, but they are presented by the Holy Spirit. So the choice today is, yes, God, I believe you. I see the signs. I believe that you're coming back and there's going to be an eternity. Or no, God, I don't believe you, but the choice is on your shoulders. What if I'm wrong? You've heard me ask this before. What if there is no God? What if there's no heaven, no hell? What if when you leave this world, that's it? That's all you got? I mean, this is everything. This is the only thing you got. What if everything in the Bible was made up? What if everything we've talked about was untrue? When you leave this world, what have you lost? I mean, really, if we want to just think straight humanistically, what if everything we talked about was false, fake, was fraudulent, no truth to it? When we leave this world, what have we lost? We've gained friends. We had a moral compass. We had people that we could count on. We had something to ease our conscience when we're going through difficult times. And let's just say humanistically, what if nothing is true that we've studied and we've lost nothing? But can I tell you something? Throughout the centuries, men and women have tried to disprove this book. And you know why they haven't? Because they can't. Men and women have tried adamantly to disprove that there was a man named Jesus Christ that lived and was crucified and reappeared days later, and they can't disprove it because history recorded it. So what if it is true? And by the way, with everything I have, I believe it is true. And I leave this world, and I know Jesus is my Lord and Savior, then everything I read about I now can experience. What if it is true? And everything you've heard about, and yet we refuse to believe, now we have to experience that eternal separation. God says, I want you to understand that there are birth pains, and when you see the birth pains, you be ready. But He's not going to make it. That's the choice you got to make. Would you bow your heads? With every head bowed, with every eye closed. I want to ask you one question. Are you ready? You see the signs? There's no arguing that those signs have taken place right now in our life. They're contractions. It's not about church, denominationalism, goodness, my shamefulness or my sin. This is about God's love for you. So much so that He sent His Son and He gives us warning signs so that we might be prepared. I'm asking you one more time.